After Trudy is gone, Tagomi and Juliana watch the tapes that Benson had handed to Tagomi. In the tape, it appears that Nazi soldiers including Joe take some prisoners to a strange tunnel. Juliana is among those prisoners. Joe takes them deep into the tunnel, and from the other side, a doctor appears. The prisoners are supposed to be handed over to him. But just before that, Joe goes to Juliana and shoots her dead before shooting himself in the head as well. Juliana watches the tape in horror, finally finding the cause of her death, just like she wanted. At the Adler household, a hooded robber appears in the middle of the night, completely disregards Mrs. Adler's dead body, and starts robbing her of her possessions, specifically Adler's old watch. The burglar actually turns out to be Smith, who returns back home after finishing his task. Helen is miserable and can't stop sobbing thinking of what she had done, but Smith controls her and tells her that it's okay now, and he had dealt with it. Tomorrow 2 people would confess to Adler's murder, and that would be all of it. Joe has once again begun his work as Smith's, or this time the SS's assassin. He gets a new order to execute an old acquaintance of his, and Joe quickly finishes the job. He then returns back to report the success of his mission, and is handed another envelope containing the next mission. This time his target is the Nazi official Howard, and the trade minister of the Pacific States Tagomi. After finishing with business at home, Smith goes back to his office, where all of the tapes in Hitler's possession earlier are brought back to his office so that he can examine them and determine the next steps that the Reich should take. Smith is confused as to why they were not given to the Reichsmarschall instead, but the researcher makes up some excuse about the tapes being exclusive. Smith realizes that he is being groomed for the Reichsmarschall's post, but doesn't say anything. He simply agrees to the task he is given. The researcher then takes Smith to a facility where they have captured a person named Fatima Hassan. They believe that Fatima was one of the travelers who can travel from one reality to another freely, and have captured her for research purposes. Smith is perplexed, so the researcher tells him in a fancy way that Fatima from their world was dead. However, the girl before him was Fatima, so she must be from another world. He even kept the entire hand imprints of the dead Fatima as proof. Smith, who had never believed in sci-fi fantasy stuff, can't believe it all, but the truth was right before him. Individuals just like him, just like everyone else, existed in a different dimension. Before Smith leaves the facility, the researcher hands him a tape that Fatima had been carrying along with her, and Smith decides to take it with him for examination. The ambassador of Berlin is hosted by Tagomi at his house for a party event, and Joe gets to join the ambassador as well as the attaché. At the party, Joe immediately notices Juliana and approaches her. Juliana is still not sure if she can trust Joe, as he didn't even look for her after he had escaped. Joe, however, explains that Smith told him that she was dead, after which he was taken to his father. When he reveals who his father was, Juliana feels a bit guilty about everything, since Joe probably had suffered so much in the last few months. Still, she cannot shake off what she had seen in the tape about how she would die at his hands. She refuses to discuss this further at the party, and so Joe leaves after a brief talk with Tagomi. Elsewhere, Childen and Ed have been living a quiet life in the neutral zone for some time now, as Childen goes to a bar where he meets up with another refugee. The guy starts asking Childen some questions about his life outside of the neutral zone to stir up some conversation. As they talk, a man listens to their conversation with great interest. Childen, who is frustrated with the boring life of the neutral zone, goes back to Ed and tells him that it's time to go back to their normal lives. However, Ed doesn't seem so eager to leave. He has found life in the neutral zone much better, and more importantly, safer. Childen tells him that he will leave in the morning and will wait until then, and leaves. Later that day, Joe goes to Juliana's place, hoping to convince her that the work he was doing was only because he was being forced to do it. He tries to convince her of his love that has always been pure for her, and for a brief moment Juliana believes as well. However, as soon as they both kiss, Juliana is once again filled with the same memories from the tape of when she was killed by him. That confuses Joe, who thinks she is scared of the Nazis, but that is not the case. Smith, on the other hand, takes his family to the premiere of the movie made on the life of Thomas. His son's life was now being used as propaganda to further the fascist movement all over America. Helen is a bit angered that they weren't able to mourn their child's death either, but Smith assures her that this would help them save the girls. He reveals to her that he was being groomed for the post of Reichsmarschall, and once he got that job he could save the girls from all forms of examination. The current Reichsmarschall has other plans, however, and tells his right-hand man to reveal all dirt on him to Hans Himmler. The man does exactly that and tells Himmler that the Smiths had killed the Adlers so that their son's disease would remain a secret. Himmler seems disappointed and tells the man to investigate further about Smith and his treasons. Somewhere in the Pacific States, a truck is suddenly apprehended. At first sight, it appears that the truck is transporting just some stones, but the soldiers soon discover a man hidden under the stones. It was Hagen, who is immediately taken into custody. Hagen doesn't give in under the torture of Nakamura, but when Kaido joins the fun, Hagen immediately starts spitting secrets. The one main thing he says is that Frank was alive. The man closely listening to Childen and the other man's conversation takes the other man, Samson, hostage. He asks Samson to take him to all the Jews he was hiding. When the latter refuses to know any Jews, the crazed man commands him to take him to the local Catholic church, St. Teresa's, where he hears there are a lot of Jew refugees. The two men drive to the church and the crazed guy starts closely checking on everyone around him until during the mass he realizes that the father himself was a Jew. He points a gun at the man and from among the crowd, a severely burned Frank rises asking the man to calm down. The man gets more and more disgruntled and angry, demanding all the Jews when suddenly Leela shoots the man dead. This whole setup wasn't there to hide Jews, it was a rebel camp. After the explosion and killing of the general of the Pacific States, Frank had been living here in the church as a refugee. However, he hadn't been living idly, as Frank is revealed to be the same person who was painting and creating the posters that Ragan and his lackeys were distributing and spreading all over the Pacific States. Joe, on the other hand, is back in business. The new Nazi man heads all right to his next target, Howard's house, and shoots him in broad daylight. As he leaves, he takes Howard's briefcase along with him. He stops by a local shop to notice that he was being followed by Juliana and confronts her. They decide to meet up later, after which Joe goes to a shady business area where he meets up with a guy to gather all the information he could about Tagomi. Elsewhere, the new leader of the Yakuza comes to meet with Kaido and resolve issues that they had in the past. He wants to establish a good relationship with the chief inspector. Kaido proposes a new deal with the Yakuza. If they can track down and kill Frank, he would turn a blind eye to their illegal oil buying and selling in the Pacific States. After dealing with the Yakuza, Kaido is notified of another death and goes there to see Howard's dead body in broad daylight. The inspector gets no rest at all and is immediately called back because of a protest against the lack of oil and fuel in the cities. Almost as soon as the protest begins, the Kempeitai approach and begins their usual response. Juliana gets caught up in the protests as well and almost gets the same treatment as the others, but Joe manages to save her just in time and take her to her apartment. Kaido watches as the severe protest continues, and Monk literally burns himself on the road just for protesting. Suddenly, the chief inspector notices some papers on the floor and picks them up. It's the same picture that Nakamura had caught the teenager with, a picture of the rising sun. At Juliana's apartment, one thing leads to another. She and Joe end up sleeping together. Juliana tells Joe about the visions and how she and him were in the mines. However, before Juliana can reveal that he kills her there, Joe tells her that they could take a vacation to that place. He asks her to consider it and then leaves. Smith goes into the tapes that he got from the researcher. In the tapes, he notices a young boy that looks just like his son Thomas. If what the researcher had said was true, the boy was Thomas too, just from another dimension. Smith starts getting influenced by the repressed grief of his son's death as he watches one tape after another in search of his son. And then suddenly he has a vision. In the vision, John Smith walks through a war-ridden street witnessing the soldiers brutally killing a woman while tearing her away from her child. They try to shoot the child as well, but their bullets run dry, and so one of the soldiers grabs the child and swings her to throw her away. Smith wakes up just then, panting in his sleep. Elsewhere, Ed decides that Childen was right and prepares to leave the neutral zone with him. He gives his lover Jack a kiss and promises him to take care of himself, thanking Jack for all the confidence that he had given him. The two business partners then leave for the Pacific States in their torn old bus with tons of scrap that Childen had bought during their stay in the neutral zone. Childen believes that there is enough material there that can make them spend the rest of their days swimming in yen. Suddenly, the two men are surrounded by some bandits who start firing at them and order them to stop. Ed plans to use force, but Childen tells him to act smart. They try to tell the bandits that all they had was useless scarps, but one of them finds the diary containing all the cost of the materials they had bought, and there was no way they would let them go with all that loot. The bandits take away all their stuff and leave them stranded in the middle of the neutral zone with nothing but themselves. Back in San Francisco, Joe calls up Himmler himself, for whom he appears to be working. He assures Himmler that Tagomi will be dead soon, as he had already made necessary preparations. That night, as Tagomi returns back to his home from the house of one of his acquaintances, Joe follows him slowly. Tagomi realizes that he is being followed but keeps walking until he notices that the entire street was empty and no help was coming for him. Tagomi slowly stops and Joe appears behind him and puts a gun to his head. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and hit that like button to help our channel grow. Turn on the notifications so you won't miss any of our new videos. Thanks for watching.